CGI got a big fat contract from the Obama administration and built the Obamacare website. Well, it is a flop. Even Democrats who voted for Obamacare say it is a catastrophe. So what is the Obama administration doing about CGI now? Well, you might want to sit down. Since the healthcare site's disastrous launch on October 1st, the government has now awarded at least 5 more contracts to CGI, totaling $7 million. Republican Senator Rob Portman joins us. How do you like that?
Greta, it's doubling down on dysfunction.
You don't like that, I take it?
No.
How does this happen?
Well, I mean, one thing the right hand doesn't, or the left hand is doing probably in the bureaucracy, and it's a bunch of different agencies and departments, but somebody needs to be held accountable. You got a letter in front of you.
I was just going to say, speaking of accountable, let me go to my next topic.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, Secretary Sebelius is going to testify before a committee that you're on.
Right.
Okay. I'm curious whether you're going to ask her about this August 28th letter that you wrote her. And in the letter, if I can just summarize it, you asked her all sorts of things, including whether or not she would urge a delay. You'd asked about whether there was testing done. Did she ever reply to this letter?
No.
So tomorrow you're going to ask her why she didn't answer this letter?
Yeah, I'm going to say, look, more than a month before the October 1st deadline, I wrote you a letter saying this doesn't look good. It looks like the infrastructure is not in place. You're going to have problems with your IT, that the website's not going to be ready, and, we never heard back from you. We called, we wrote.
You also wrote Marilyn Tavenner, the woman who testified today before the Senate as
she
well.
also didn't get back to us. Here's what I think happened in part. I think during the election campaign they didn't get their act together because they didn't want to start rolling things out, particularly the regulations that were controversial. They got behind, yet they wanted to keep the date of October 1st. It's too bad because my constituents are the one bearing the brunt of it. I get a call from a guy last week. It says, I've tried for 2 weeks to get on this thing. Finally I got through on the website, registered. I find out that my individual coverage is going to double in price. And then a woman this week saying, kind of the same thing. She's got a kid in college. They're trying to make ends meet. She finds out that her coverage is going to be almost twice as expensive. So,
but that's the merging of two problems. One is the website, which I actually think is something that probably can be fixed, in which the Obama administration is feeling like egg all over its face for. But the other is whether Obamacare is going to be cost effective, whether people are going to have cheaper rates, and whether it's going to cover everybody.
Yeah. Well, those are 3 promises. One, the president said you can keep your coverage. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah, he added if last night, a new phrase, a disclaimer, but whatever.
Yeah, well, last night you know what he said? I think he said if you have employer coverage. That's what I meant. Well, guess what? When the employer coverage kicks in.
If I were his lawyer, I'd tell him, just put the lid on that one. I would just move on, but go ahead.
Well, he delayed the employer for a year. When that kicks in, we're going to find also a lot of people with employer coverage are going to lose their coverage. So he's doubling down. Just as they're doubling down on dysfunction, he's doubling down on his misspeak. Now, second, he said it's going to cost less. He said $2,500 on average per family, lower costs. The Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan group, says no, it's about $2,100 more per family for individual coverage. In Ohio, we're told it's a 41% increase next year. That's more than $100 a month for a family in Ohio. And then, he also promised that this thing would work,
even without the Congressional Budget Office giving its numbers, and they've, I have a little problem sometimes with numbers. It doesn't. There's a fundamental part of it doesn't make sense. It requires everyone to put money in the pool, and the sicker people take it out, and the healthier people don't. Well, a lot of people got out of the pool. Some of the unions got exemptions. A lot of people, the employers got a waiver for a year. I mean, they got out of it.
Got
right.
It too.
So they're out of it.
34 unions.
Now we've got the problem that a lot of the young people probably aren't going to get in it, so they're not going to be putting money into it. Then we've got the problem that people who are enrolling is a Medicaid expansion, not the people who are paying full freight. So it's just like the numbers just don't seem to be there. I mean, that's where I think is the big problem.
Yeah, the numbers aren't working because the pool isn't working because young people are not signing up as they'd hoped for. Another promise the president made, though, was about coverage. And if you look at what, again, the nonpartisan groups are saying, like the Congressional Budget Office, 10 years from now, after Obamacare has been implemented, still there will be 30 million Americans uninsured. That's a shock to my constituents when I tell them that. All this sound and fury and 19 new taxes and $1.1 trillion in new deficit spending and so on. After all this, all the regulations, all the mandates, all the difficulty in getting through this website, still 30 million Americans left uninsured? There's got to be a better way.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we're going to get the numbers on November 15th, supposedly. And tomorrow we're going to hear, was that going to be your first question, why she didn't answer your letter? Because I'm going to be listening.
I'm not going to say why I didn't answer my letter. I'm going to say, look, we laid this thing out in the letter. We need to know
Well,
the
but you
answers
know,
now.
why didn't she answer? You actually asked those questions.
have a
Did
good
you test
answer.
it? I mean, you asked rather
She didn't
specific.
test it,
Right? I
so,
mean,
you
you
know.
asked me rather important, specific questions, and you know the fact that what she just ignored. I mean, it might have actually, had she answered it, they might have fixed it and not had the problems.
There you
But
go.
anyway,
Could have saved them a lot of hassle.
Could have saved a lot of problems. Senator, thank you, sir.
Good to see you again, Greta.